yourself.
Hi, I'm Jessica Siegel. I'm the conservation agent for the city of Greenfield.
Wonderful. It's nice to have you all here today, this morning. So Audrey and I are sharing the screens. We've had a run on technology and conference rooms this morning at the COG. So just bear with us. We're hoping that we're not gonna have any technical glitches. But did everyone get a copy of the agenda? Because I think we'll jump right in, and if some other folks join us a little later, that would be great. I'm going to share my screen with the presentation. Oh, no?
Yeah, that's the whole screen here. Good.
Oh, okay.
Yep, that's good.
Okay. And let's see. Now, did everybody disappear? No, there they are. Okay. Oh, I see. It's up there. Great. We have another person joining us. So can everyone, do you see the presentation like full screen? Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. We'll get started with the agenda. The first thing we wanted to do, let's see, wake my computer up. So we've done our welcome and introductions. Andrew Smith joined us. He's the MVP regional coordinator for the Connecticut River Valley. Welcome, Andrew. Okay, and next we're going to jump right into some of the findings from a framework for resilience. We talked a bit about this at the last meeting, that resilient communities can really be built by thinking about resiliency at the watershed scale. And so in order to do this, we're working in the entire Deerfield River watershed. But as you can see on this map, we have many smaller watersheds that are shared by our communities and even smaller drainage areas. Welcome, Carolyn.
Hello.
Nice to have you. We just got started. We did a brief round of introductions and we jumped right in. Carolyn is joining us as the representative from the town of Deerfield. So like we talked about before, there are 3 questions when we're thinking about watershed scale resiliency that every town should be asking themselves. How many watersheds are in your town? Do you know where those watershed boundaries are? And who are your watershed neighbors? So this slide that we're showing you right now gives you a good sense of that. So for example, Holly, where Will is representing Holly. Holly shares watersheds with Buckland. They share a watershed with Charlemont. They share a watershed with Ashfield. So you can see as we kind of drill down to that it can become it can feel a little overwhelming, but as we know, if you're not thinking about resiliency at this systems level, then all the work that you might do at a specific site could be not that successful if your neighbors upstream are either not doing anything, not able to do anything, or doing work that's maybe counter to this whole systems approach. So, looking through the framework for resilience, I pulled out some of the high-level recommendations for 2 of the categories, natural resources and habitat, and infrastructure and economy. And as you can imagine, there's some crossover, right, between these two sectors. So when we're thinking about flooding and flood resiliency, really the primary or the thing that should be front and center in our minds is how do we manage the stormwater throughout the entire watershed, right? So there are various things that we can do. We can use the built environment to build resiliency. And what does that mean? That means that for any new development projects, whether they be infill projects or new construction, whether they're redevelopment projects, how can we protect the landscape that serves a variety of resiliency functions? How can we protect the wetlands, the forests, and the open space while this development is happening and in the future? We should treat stormwater as a resource, right? It's something to be captured and infiltrated so it can recharge our drinking water aquifers, recharge our rivers and streams. And this becomes even more important in the face of the increasing droughts, the number of droughts that we're having, the kind of longevity of the droughts that we're having. I think we're still in a drought situation in the Deerfield watershed. We can require or encourage the use of low impact development techniques and other nature-based solutions. So that can all happen. Those types of actions can happen in your village centers, in the areas of your towns that are already developed, already have infrastructure, and those areas where you might be planning to do future development work, whether it be housing or commercial development. Another consideration that's really important is to think about how to slow the flow of stormwater runoff in the upland watershed areas. So many of especially in the hill towns, right, of the Deerfield, the topography is very steep, the streams are very flashy. When we do get a rain event, water levels rise really high, and then they drop down really quickly. So how can we kind of keep that water, slow it down, keep it in the upland areas, have it spread out, slow down. And certainly Deerfield will be appreciative of any efforts to do that, being that they are at the bottom of the watershed. Prioritizing culvert and bridge upsizing. So what does that mean? That means, and many of you know this already, that you have many culverts in your towns. I think Holly might have more culverts than people actually, or pretty darn close. And these culverts and bridges, they cross streams and rivers, but there are also culverts that just provide road drainage, right? All of these culverts it's rare that you find an existing culvert that is properly sized to handle the storm events that we are now experiencing. And so part of like the systems thinking is, how is the water moving through this drainage infrastructure? Is it getting backed up? Is it causing downstream flooding? And so I know many of you have already been working in your communities to upsize or right size these structures to handle the rain events that we're seeing. So another technique that we'll be learning more about and talking more about as our work continues is what are the management strategies, the protection strategies, the restoration strategies that we can use in our floodplains and our river corridors? So again, how can we slow the flow, capture this stormwater? How can we stabilize the banks that are being eroded during these storm events? And then finally, as part of managing the stormwater throughout the watershed, thinking about how we can support climate resilient farming practices and climate resilient forest management practices. So these recommendations that I just summarized are in the report, A Framework for Resilience. If you go to page 73, which is part 4 of the report called Building Resilience. So if you'd like to kind of take a deeper dive into these, you can do that. I think the next thing I wanted to highlight in that section 4 of the report is the recommendations about protecting critical infrastructure. So it's no surprise that much of our critical infrastructure is near our rivers, because that's the way the area was settled, right? That's where our mills popped up. That's where our farming is done. That's where people built their houses. And so now, in the face of a changing climate, this image shows Conway Center, which has a lot of critical infrastructure in the 100-year floodplain, as well as the river corridor. And this is pretty typical of what we see in many of the towns in the Deerfield River watershed. So I wanted, are there any questions at this point, before I share a case study with you? Or any comments?
I would ask, so when you talk about slow the flow, and are there, the practical means for this, at least in a town like Holly, we don't have a lot of floodplain, and whatever floodplain we do have is already got either infrastructure or someone's house. And I get that, you put some stumps or something in the river, kind of slows it down right around the stump. But unless you have beavers or something come in and actually develop a impoundment, you're not going to find much in the way of a slow the flow for a town like Holly. You're aware of those challenges, right?
Yes, Will, and it's a great question. And I will say that there are techniques that we can consider for these more steep forested upland areas to slow the flow. So if you think back a couple of 100 years ago, when the land was basically deforested, right? Widely deforested because of the farms that came in, and they needed grazing areas for the livestock. Those activities really disrupted the stream network, these what they call smaller order streams. And in many cases, they're disconnected from their floodplains, right? They've eroded down in their beds. And so when storm events come, they're basically like fire hoses. And I know that Holly has experienced that type of really strong runoff after storm events, like coming down the hillsides, right? Because that's the only pathway for the water. So Trout Unlimited has been doing some work. They've got some demonstration sites in the H.O. Cook Forest, on the Crowning Shield property in Heath. They've done a lot of work, as the U.S. Forest Service has as well, in situations like what you see in Holly. And basically, and this can be a hard sell, and we can delve deeper into some of these techniques in one of our future meetings, but we need to add more wood to these streams. These they're called headwater streams, because if you look at a system that hasn't been compromised or manipulated by humans, you'll see those trees that fall down and kind of they create these little dams and breaks where the flow is captured and it's slowed down. So that's one technique that we've been looking into more that can be used in the areas or in terrain like what you see in Holly, because yeah, you have very limited opportunities to do any of that slow the flow work in your floodplain.
Yeah, because if we back up the water there, the impoundment reaches somebody's house.
Right.
And then you have land underwater, which all of us know if you're on the Conservation Commission, that creates an entirely new dynamic for those owners of that property. And they won't really be interested in having land underwater, which was formerly land above water.
Right.
You know, you're like, you're treading a very thin or a very fine needle to make that a sellable, sellable item in our town. Because I have been working on this post Irene, and it's a really difficult sell.
Yes, it's a very difficult sell, and we do, as part of the Woodlands Partnership, submitted an application to the MVP program and so the Woodlands Partnership, Holly is a member,
Yep.
Charlemont, Ashfield. So one of the tasks in that grant application would be to identify where those opportunities are for those upland watershed management projects. And as we've talked about, then the next challenge is this is all private property, or not all private property, but in the case of Holly, there's a lot of state-owned property. So we do have a precedence there where in the H.O. Cook Forest, in Heath, and maybe it goes into Coleraine too, they have done some of this work. So, but on private property where a lot of this work potentially could happen, how do we incentivize that, or how do we engage the landowners in these projects that will probably benefit them, right? Because it creates habitat, it's part of like a more resilient forest management approach, but then it will also, potentially benefit their neighbors in the town as well. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, not only to identify those areas more exactly, but to engage the people who could, are critical to making it happen. So are there any other comments or questions? All right, thank you for that, Will. Well, I'm glad that we have someone from the town of Ashfield here, because my case study that I wanted to share with everyone is going to tell the story of the work that we've been doing in the South River Watershed, which includes the towns of Ashfield and Conway. So hang on just a minute while I shift over to the story map that we created for this project. So I stop my sharing.
Sure.
And then I've got to or I need to get out of this. Oh, okay. And yeah, I can start it right here.
Right. We have a story map that we're trying to share with you on the internet, and this is also something that we can share with you on our webpage that we've been working on creating. So can everyone see this map of Franklin County, Vermont with the orange Give me a thumbs up. Thank you, Star. I can see your thumb and Carolyn.
Oh.
Awesome.
Great. So thanks. So this story map was created to showcase the work that the Franklin Regional Council of Governments and the towns of Ashfield and Conway, the Friends of the South River, Trout Unlimited, our consultant team, Franklin Land Trust, and of course the grant funders, which included the Mass Department of Environmental Protection. There was also a earmark grant, pre-disaster mitigation grant that came through Congressman Olver back in the day. And then, of course, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, the MVP program, has been funding this work more recently. So this, you can see the map that shows the watershed here. Here's the South River watershed kind of at the bottom corner of the Deerfield. It's almost 17,000 acres in the South River watershed, so it's quite big. I'm going to scroll through some of the things we already know. So the watershed, the South River watershed is the third most populated watershed within the larger Deerfield Basin. About 11% of the land is agricultural, but most of the watershed is forested. This map shows the towns of Ashfield, and this is Conway, showing the permanently protected open space or permanently protected land in the watershed. And I can zoom in a bit so you can see where the South River, so there are sections of the South River that in the upland areas, the lands are protected, but there's a lot of unprotected land as well. We talked about how there are many critical facilities along the South River itself and within the river corridor. And this is kind of a close-up view of Conway Center. But the same can be said for Ashfield. You can see here that one of the main evacuation routes crosses through the mapped river corridor. And all these little red dots are culverts that are in critical condition, some of which are located, you know, in the river corridor or the 100-year floodplain. So we talked a bit about the importance of adequately sized culverts and stream crossings to the flood resiliency, but also the water quality and the overall health of the watershed itself. I'm going to scroll down to this map. So this map with all the red dots on it are culverts that are in critical condition throughout the towns of Ashfield and Conway. So as part of the grant funding that we've had over the years, FERCOG's transportation planning staff have inventoried all the stormwater drainage structures and found that about 10% of Ashfields and about 10% of Conways are in critical condition. Now, this data is a little old at this point, so it might have, you know, the conditions might have changed. You'll see when you're on the story map that there are links to that you can click on to find out more information. So like these links here will take you to the culvert inventory web application for each of the towns that has more detailed information, including pictures. But you can see just from this map how important this stormwater management and drainage infrastructure is to our small towns. I think Holly, we've done their inventory. Charlemont.
I think they did their own.
Charlemont did their own. Greenfield.
Yeah, I think the only ones we're missing in the Deerfield River watershed in West County is Rowe, actually. We'll be doing that this summer.
Okay, and then Deerfield.
Yep, we got Deerfield.
We did Deerfield. But we can provide you with links for your towns to get that information. This has always been kind of my poster child when I picture series of pictures when I talk about how important it is to properly kind of manage the floodplain as well as the river corridor. We have so many existing encroachments into the floodplain, which basically just transfers all of the damages, not only at a particular site, but upstream and downstream. And so here in Conway, this was a situation where this site repeatedly washed out along the South River. And this slider tool shows the NRCS had just built this beautiful geocell retaining wall. And literally, like within, I think it was, not even a couple of weeks, Tropical Storm Irene came and blew it all out. And that was like the third or fourth time that this site had been damaged. And there are all kinds of reasons for why that keeps happening. And so that kind of takes me to the next point about why is this flooding and erosion happening? And some of you are probably already familiar with how important it is to understand both like the past history of your watershed, and I'm talking hundreds of years in the past, the current conditions and the future conditions. So in the South River watershed, it's not just climate change that is causing all this flooding and erosion. The legacy of the historic mills and the dams that were built along the river to power grist mills, sawmills, and mills for making linen. At some point there, I think there were over 30 mills, 30 dams on this river. And even though many of them were small, they did impact the river system. Many of them are gone now. The other thing that happened, and this is not atypical, we see this a lot in our river systems in Franklin County, is that the rivers were straightened and even sometimes moved, right, in order to accommodate the development that was happening. So this map gives you an idea of how much like human manipulation happened to the South River in Conway. I think the other thing we better understand now is that rivers they move over time, even if humans aren't manipulating them, right? And they need to have that room to do so. And so this this picture shows kind of like both happening. We see like a berm that was put in here. We see where the current channel is and where the river was in the past. So there's a lot of good information, that you can peruse like as you have time. I want to keep track of the time here. Yeah, there's a great little video clip here about the work in the South River that was on PBS Connecting Point a couple of years ago. So if you want to watch that. So let me scroll down to like building resiliency. So I mentioned all the project partners that we've been working with basically since like 2009. And so we're looking at projects that are that we would both build, like the project, the floodplain reconnection project that was done on town-owned property, like just downstream of the village center in Conway, as well as looking at what we call avoidance strategies, which is like how can we prevent future encroachments in the floodplain in the river corridor, and how can we keep people and infrastructure out of harm's way. So as you scroll through the story map, you'll see, pictures of the floodplain reconnection project, some other infrastructure protection projects, and discussion about the river corridor management work that's been done over the last 10 plus years. So that like Audrey said, we're happy to share the link to this story map with you, and hopefully you'll have time to go through it, because there's just so much great information, and we'd love to hear any feedback that you have on the story map. We do need to do some updates to it. I think you'll find, especially in Ashfield, like some updates about the work that's been done on the Ashfield Lake Dam need to be added. But yeah, so that was our case study that we wanted to share. And before we hop to the next item on the agenda, which is the data review and the map, yeah, I'm happy to open it up to any questions or comments that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I would like to see this. Where is this on your website? Is this
So it's
available? Where is it available?
so we'll share the link, but also if you want to look at it like right away, if you go to the Town of Conway's website, they actually have a page dedicated to the work that's been done in the South River watershed. And there are a bunch of good links there to all of the plans and studies that have been done. And if you scroll down, you'll find the link to this story map. I guess could we put it in? Yeah. In the chat? Mm-hmm. And then let's see. Oh my gosh. Oh, thank you. So I'll put it in the chat. Oh, what's going on there? Okay. So we'll put it in the chat. But then also, yeah, like I said, the Town of Conway's website is there, has it as well. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, I think I'll turn it over to Audrey now.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to share another map. This is something that we were working on in the last meeting together. Yeah, let me just do that. And boom, another share. So for those of you who were here at the last meeting, I pulled up this map and we had a nice fun discussion about different, well, I have them as problem locations, but we'll just call them improvement locations within your town, within the Deerfield watershed. So the parts of your town that are in the Deerfield watershed, whether it's stormwater drainage issues or culvert repair issues, or just general erosion from Hurricane Irene. So we were trying to do this during the last meeting. For the people who were here at the last meeting, they'll remember it got a little tricky. So I took the comments that we had from the recording and the ones I wrote down, and I plopped them in here, disregarding these little cluster right down here. So just as a reminder, this map was, it's intended for us to sort of have a great place to document our problems / improvements within our town. So that way we can reference it at our meetings in different exercises. And you can visually see how close your, issues within your watershed are close to your neighbors and also within your neighbors' watersheds. So, for example, here was 3 of them that were recommended by the town of Charlemont. And you can see that they are, the representative from Charlemont recommended these, but they're in 3 different sub watersheds there. So that's just an example of, okay, well, Charlemont is, it'd be cool if they could work with this group, maybe a little bit in Holly and a little bit over here, and stuff like that. And also just how closely related they are in general. Same here with Bernardston and Greenfield. We had some, and Leiden. We had some comments about erosion along Green River Road. We had some comments about, what was it? What does it say? So if you click on the dot, it will actually pop up. Oops. I'll turn these layers off so that way we can actually click on the dot. And the comment, oh, that one was another tester one, so ignoring that. It was, this is the one I'm looking for. So there was 4 little testers that I need to delete. Landslide between Morphy Park and Green River in the Green River conservation area was the comment that I heard. So Jessica, if that is wrong, I can edit it. And yeah, so stuff like that. So what I wanted to do today was just refresh you guys of this. And based off of Kimberly's presentation she just gave, perhaps if you had some other ideas come to mind throughout your time, you could share them with me now and I can enter them much quicker than before. And if not, then we can just put them in the comments and I can enter them once we wrap everything up. So this map will live on our website and you are welcome to share it with people in your town, take it to different meetings. And the great thing is you can leave a comment, but you can't edit anyone else's. So don't worry about deleting someone else's. All right, so the floor is open to you all, and I will keep my eye on the chat.
We have a lot of problems in the North Meadows in Deerfield from flooding. So we use the CSP program, it's a buffer program, and we have a few farmers and hopefully Deerfield Academy signing up to have a buffer that will go the length of the Deerfield from Stillwater Bridge to the connection with Connecticut.
Oh, whoa. Okay,
So
so I also
that's
see
what
really taking some notes down too. Can you repeat that part after you said flooding in the North Meadows? So you had what was it?
well, we have every time we have an intense rain event. It seems like the North Meadows floods quite a bit. So it's not anything new, but it's been more intense over the years since Irene. And so through our MVP program, Celia Yazwinski, my granddaughter, and the Yazwinski farm has been, she's been pretty active with a FEMA project she's doing. And so she has been actively signing up the farmers along from Stillwater Bridge to the Connecticut, where the Deerfield joins the Connecticut. And so we've worked with Nick Miller from Field Geology, so he could figure out what, the size of the buffers. It's from 35 feet to 150 feet, and it depends where it is on the river. So she's, for this last deadline for the CSP program with NRCS, where they pay for the farmers to put land in a buffer, that, not to plant it. So she's signed up about a third so far, and she's working on a proposal to Deerfield Academy to, put in a permanent buffer. And, because she's a student there. And, so it hasn't gone to the trustees yet, but that's a big chunk. The Yazwinski farm is signed up and the Williams farm is in the process of signing up. So, for the program through, Natural Resource and Conservation Service. So I think that will have some impact, when we have more moderate flooding events. Obviously, it's not gonna do anything, in major events like Irene, but, when we had, such a wall of water come down. But, in the more slow flooding events, over the years that we've had since Irene, it might have some pretty significant impact on the erosion.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Kimberly said that's fabulous.
That's fabulous.
She's
Yeah.
very impressed with that work.
Yeah,
Um,
well, we'll see but it's from the Stillwater Bridge to the Connecticut.
okay, that's good to know. Thanks. So yeah, if I know there's a few people here who were not here at the last meeting. So if you have if you're a little confused about what this map is, any clarification questions you can ask. You can ask right now. I just want to get as much people on the same page, and then we'll use this map a little bit more going forward than just entering data points.
Okay.
So on the map, I'd like to ask why it looks to me like you have some culverts that are called out as in critical condition, but like there's 40 in Holly that are on the FERCog Holly culvert assessment. So I would expect to see Holly covered in red dots.
Yeah,
I
so
don't see that.
are you talking about the map that I have pulled up right here?
Yeah, this map.
Yeah, so this is one that we're just working on together internally, Will. So we just created this for the last meeting.
I see.
So these are like general comments about like kind of anything, but so it doesn't have to be every single culvert in town, every single critical culvert, but if you're like, this is one that needs to get fixed now, or if you want some of your critical culverts put on here, just tell me which ones they are.
Well,
Or it could
for
just be
instance,
general, so yeah.
I mean, I see down in the lower left quadrant of Holly, King Corner is called out. We've just applied to MVP to do construction on replacing that culvert. It's
Okay.
currently 8 foot in diameter. And with the upsizing, it will be nearly 25 feet.
Wow, that's a big
It's
improvement.
it's a big improvement, but it's also a radical expense. This is a town-owned, state-numbered highway,
Mhm.
which puts it in a class by itself. Assuming that, we got DER money to do the design and engineering. We've just gotten the NOIs back and it looks as though we have all the permits, but it's also over $2 million for a single culvert upsizing.
Yeah, so that's an awesome point
So-
you just brought up. And after we do this mapping
Well,
exercise, we're going to talk about barriers.
Yeah, so the last thing I want to make, the point I was going to make is, so this is one culvert in a town with over 400 culverts. We don't have to do this for everyone, but we have to do this for more than a few. And we're 7 years into this project right now, and we've gotten, I don't know, $250,000 spent just getting the design done. But if I were to use that as my rule of thumb, and I would look at the other 30 culverts that need to be done in Hawley that are critical presently, I'm looking at 150 years or more of work and probably $100 million. And those kinds of numbers are very hard for us to kind of keep a mind around, get our mind around. And so this is where the resilience meets the hard pavement of the rubber of the road kind of thing, where it's like, you know, these are all great ideas, but really, are you really telling me that I've got 150 years worth of work to do? And how do we maintain that as a state? And then I think of, well, I heard an example up in New Hampshire where they were going to upsize some culverts. So they took out the culvert that was failing. They put two of similar size culverts and they put concrete across the top and then they put the road back. That's all they did at a cost of like $50,000. It was done. Two culverts, doubled the size of one culvert, and they put concrete over the top. So no engineering, nothing.
Yeah,
Different
it'll be
approach,
fun. Yeah.
different solution, but they doubled the volume. So I'm thinking, you know, we got to start thinking out of the box here because I got 150-year worth of work and $100 million in a town of 300 people. The state's really got to come to terms with this is just an unworkable goal that we're setting out. And we ought to talk about how that, you know, where the rubber meets the road sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think that's a good transition. Oh, Kimberly
Oh,
has a point to make.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to say, yeah, I think what you're describing, Will, is so critical and one of like the biggest barriers, which like Audrey said, we're going to keep talking about. That I wanted to link your comments back to the earlier discussion about slowing the flow, right? So, or capturing, slowing down the water in the upland areas to kind of reduce the strain, if you will, on these undersized culverts. So that's just one other piece of the puzzle. It doesn't address the fact that it's so expensive and takes a long time to do one of these projects, but there are likely culverts that are, you know, kind of strained beyond their capacity. And in those smaller, in the drainage areas where that water is coming from, maybe there's something that can be done to capture and dissipate the flow to reduce the stress on those undersized culverts. So I just wanted to kind of make that connection back to our previous discussion.
So I think unless people have more comments, this might be actually an okay spot to stop with this exercise. And I'm just going to say you can send messages in the chat if you think of more locations in your town. Any general or specific comments? So for example, this one that's in row was about general stormwater drainage. So this comment was about they said, let me just click it. They said generalized flooding issues around town due to undersized drainage during storms, and they just like mentioned that row is higher up in elevation, so they see a lot of these major, not in elevation, it's higher up upland, so they don't see some of the effects of these major storms that maybe like say towns downstream might. But they have these generalized issues that are a little bit smaller. This comment was about Japanese knotweed along the Pelham Brook. So anything like that, we'll keep adding to this. See on our website probably next week. So we'll reshare a link. Oh, no.
Please. Well, you can get out of the office. Can people still hear you?
Yeah.
Oh. Did the whole thing die? Can anybody hear us?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you
but
too.
The video has
Right.
frozen.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. I noticed my camera was frozen and now we're trying to stop sharing the screen.
But if you can, oh, there you are. Okay, we're gonna, we're gonna try to stop sharing the screen and see if that, all of a sudden, everything went dark. But I think you're coming back and we can close out this story map too. Maybe that would help.
I can see the other participants and we're all still moving and alive and
Oh, good. Okay,
We might
I'm-
just have to relog back
everything
in.
else is frozen.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Will. But if we log out, we'll,
We'll all have to log in.
yeah, let's see. I was just gonna see if we can, oh, okay. So I'm sorry. I guess the only thing we can do is log out, and can everybody please log back in?
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Sorry. Oh.
And then everyone else has to join.
Oh, and there are already people on the waiting list.
Admit, 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 admit. I'm like too afraid to do anything too fast now.
I know. But we won't do
Okay.
be any more.
You're coming back. So
I'm moving. Yeah, I noticed I was frozen. I was like, uh-oh. All right, so I'm just going to find the record button. It's already recording, but
it's already recording.
excellent. Thank you for that. And I think we can go back to the presentation. All right, so let's talk a little bit about data and next steps. It's you.
All right. Oh, were there any other barriers that people wanted to bring up?
It is. I agree with Will so much. It's just so much money to replace these culverts.
Yeah. I really wish the state would come out with some kind of alternative mechanism that allows us to, because I think we're all on the same page about, I get slowing the water, I get all those things that physically we should be doing, but I don't get all of the things that are in my way to achieve them. I don't have that much time in my life. We're talking
Right.
hundreds, we got here with 100 years of development. And I know it's going to take hundreds of years of development to move past this point. But really, does it have to take 10 years to do a single culvert?
Right. Yeah, and that is something that here at the COG that we've been thinking about having some discussions amongst the staff and folks at DER and DEP about this. What are ways that communities can do this work, meet the stream crossing standards, right? Because that's the law that we're trying to comply with, but do it in a way that is less costly. So yeah, there are definitely a lot of people thinking about that. But in the meantime, yeah.
What is it? There's a clause that is to the maximum extent practicable. And, that needs a better definition for those of us who don't speak Latin, and don't have a lifetime to devote to this. I have like a lot to do.
But there's a large value though in identifying the areas that we are concerned about and try to pre-plan. I mean, if we have an emergency event, then you can, under emergency declaration, replace some of that. We had truly about $20 million worth of damage done in July of 2023. And, the state gave us 1.2 million or 1.3 million, something like that. And we ended up having to pay about 600,000, but we took care of some really awful areas that were flooding before. So we ended up really in a positive way, but we had already been thinking about it, what we were going to do. So it wasn't, if you plan and you organize and you identify these spots, then there is, an opportunity sometimes to replace them for less money, like under emergency declaration. But on the other hand, the state might be able to give us some money for some of the most critical ones. So if you prioritize it too, that's very helpful, because then you know which ones are going to have the most impact.
And I think that's, thanks for sharing that, Carolyn, because I think that that's something that we can do here as part of the Resilient DRW Coalition is, share ideas like that. The COG can do some, work with like the other towns to try and come up with that list, right, of priorities or those problem areas, so that after a future event, maybe those areas, they've already been pre-identified, so we know kind of where the money can go, or if there's anything that can be done kind of in advance of the next big storm.
Yes, and the other thing is, if we have warmer winters, so we're having more ice storms, we can also share root wads. If trees fall over in towns up and down the watershed, instead of just putting them in a burn pile or a debris pile, they can be stored or shared as a resource, and that cuts down on the cost in some of these replacements too, because you can use the root wads into the riverbanks in a pre-planned project too, if you have an idea of where you want to put them.
Because that's another cost. Sometimes it can be cost prohibitive even if you're doing these nature-based solutions, like, where are you sourcing the wood, the root wads, where are you sourcing that material to build these structures or stabilize the banks? Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, I'm gonna pay attention.
Yeah, I went back to DCR after Irene and asked them if wouldn't they consider adding some wood material into the branches of the Mill River that comes down out of the forest and into the Chickley. And thinking naively that they would say yes, that sure, that would help. But no, they were like, no, not a chance. We're not gonna fill up our upriver stream with root balls.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
you know, there's, at least in my town, we got half the town owned by DCR.
Yeah,
And that's an 800-pound gorilla.
yep.
They don't say much, but boy, are they in the way when it comes to working collaboratively on something like this, which is this, water flow.
Well, I hope, since it's been like 10 plus years since Irene, I think some of the thinking about these techniques has hopefully evolved, and especially because so much work and so much focus has been on the Deerfield watershed. I think we're in a better place than we were, like when the town was trying to deal with the aftermath of tropical storm Irene. But your example, Will, shows how important that kind of relationship building and outreach that's needed, not only with state agencies that own a lot of land in the watershed, but also the private landowners. And one of the things we wanted to talk about was doing some in-person meetings and maybe a field trip or two. So kind of filing away like which agency staff might be good to invite and bring into the conversation. Did anyone else have any follow-up information to share, or even like success stories to kind of make us feel a little bit better about the
Well,
work
I think one of the biggest success stories that no one really talks about is after Irene, the Conservation District at Kimberly, as you know, brought together creating a resilient communities group, and it was all the communities up and down the Deerfield River. And one of the things that was so exciting is we partnered with Windham County Conservation District in Vermont, and we were able to bring in the Vermont DOT and meet with the Mass DOT, because it was, as you know, poor Holly had a lot of issues, and we just had to bring the agencies together, state and federal partners with our towns, because this was overwhelming. And Mass DOT ended up adopting the Vermont roads and standards, which allows us to upsize our culverts when we have these storms instead of replacing them at the same size. And that was a huge, huge win for us.
Yeah.
Is for Massachusetts. And and then Mass DOT did a lot of trainings with the highway departments to show them how to replace culverts in a more bio-friendly solutions, rather than just digging everything up and putting them back without paying attention to the flow. And so we had the ability to have field geology do how rivers move and how they are not static. And so I think there was a huge, I mean, it was years ago, but it was a huge training opportunity and educational opportunity. And I think the next step is critical, that we work with state partners again to show them that there are gradient things that can be done in like the forests, and that if we have meetings, like Kimberly says, in person, you bring them to the table, maybe there's an opportunity for education so they can see how important that they are to be partners, and we can talk about some of these solutions for upgradient, slowing the water. I mean, it's complicated because there's no set thing that you can do and up and down the watershed, but there are certainly plantings and forest management and stuff like that that will have huge impacts on how much water comes down into the rivers at once. and that we have to get DCR on board. I agree with you that, but I also think that there are opportunities for education with them, and that if you bring everybody to the table, we have the opportunity to get more of collaborative work out of them, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I think there's one guy at DCR who has 9 of the forests in our area under his, at his desk. He has no responsibility for 9 of these forests. That's the kind of
Yeah.
person that we need to get, because he can make not determinations, but he can certainly make recommendations that would come
Yeah.
across.
Yep.
Well, if you share that, staffer's contact information with me, or give me a hint, some hints about how I can track it down, I'll follow up on that.
Okay.
So, yeah, well, I want to be mindful of the time. I know everyone is really busy. Was there any other information folks wanted to offer? Because this has been so helpful. And I don't see anybody's hand up, but so our next meeting topic, our next meeting is, we're going to continue kind of this discussion about the data gathering, and the project webpage will be more fully developed, and so we'll talk about that. Audrey has worked on the notes from the last meeting, so those will be shared on the project webpage. We'll also see what other data that we have internally from the work that the COG has done that we can make available on the project website as well. And we're hoping that you all are able to bring this, some of this discussion and information back to your towns, either the boards or departments that you currently serve on. I know, for example, Carolyn is part of the MVP committee in Deerfield. Steve is on the select board. Will's on the select board. It would be great to be able to share this information with your towns. And so once we have the more complete or once the project webpage is built out, that can be a place where you can send people as well for information. Before our next meeting too, if you can continue thinking about the project priorities for your towns and the capacity needs. And if you have any ideas for, intertown coordination, right? For the towns that you share a watershed with. And we'll make sure, Audrey, that we have something on the webpage. I mean, if you have a copy of a framework for resilience in the appendices, you can use those maps to see which communities you share a watershed with, but I think we'll also show that on the interactive map as well. Audrey sent out the calendar invites for our May meeting, and then in June, we sent one out for Juneteenth, which happens to be a holiday for the COG, so we need to pick a different date for that. But we're also talking about doing, like an in-person outing, maybe with a field trip. We're still kind of bouncing around ideas for that. So if you have any agency folks that you want us to reach out to, let us know. If you have other people in your towns that you would like to invite, other staff that you would like to invite, or other volunteer board members, interested residents, let us know about that. Audrey, did you have anything to add to?
No, but just as a reminder, so coming up with that preliminary list of project priorities and capacity needs, so I'm just gonna advance the slide. These are the examples that we provided in the last meeting. Of stuff that could generally be some ideas for our priority projects. So you can take a look at this and yeah, hopefully that'll help you come up with some ideas. So bringing those to the next meeting would be great.
Yeah, so before we close, any other comments or questions? We did have some activity in the chat, and thank you for that. Is there a way to share that with people, or we could post that somehow?
I can save the chat.
Yeah. So we'll figure out a way to save the chat, because some of the questions were just sent to us. They weren't shared with the whole group, but we did answer them. So we'll figure out a way to share that with folks as well.
Oh, so some of you weren't here at the last meeting, but so we kept referencing this book today, right? So the Framework for Resiliency, it's not showing up because of the blurry background, but the Framework for Resilience is on our website. But if you want a hard copy, we still have plenty of extras. So please send me your mailing address if you want a hard copy, and we can mail it to you. So again, I'll send my email in the chat right now if you want to email me.
So like Carolyn, Steve, I don't know, and Star, there might have been a couple of other folks. Yeah, so please let us know. We have plenty of copies. They're beautiful. If you are kind of a Luddite and you prefer to have hard copies of things to reference, we'd love to send you one. We're very proud of the document. It's a beautifully done document, but if you prefer to do it online, it's available on our website.
Yeah, I'd love to have some, Kimberly.
Okay, you want a few, like Carolyn?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
so I can take them to our next meeting,
Okay,
MVP meeting.
okay, great. How many would you like?
9 would be great. There's 9 of us on the committee.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It was really great to see you all. Welcome to the new members that came today. We really appreciate that. We know how valuable your time is and how many hats you wear and all the good work that you do for our small town. So we really appreciate it. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
1 minute. Yes.
In the chat.
I did try to take very good notes.
You did,
But then
thank
there was
you.
that section where we were both kind of like.
Yep, you
talking
did.
At the same time that,
No, that's fine. Let me just